The story begins by saying that nothing special happened before this. It's one of those mobile games with an automatic system, the most generic type that doesn't need any explanation. The name was Blessing of Miracle, and the question that remains is why this guy played it. It's because he's a man of culture and obviously because the waifus were very good. However, despite liking the game a lot, he never spent a cent and hadn't even finished it. But then he was sucked into it, and not as one of the playable characters, not even as an NPC. He became that little figure in the background, standing still and isolated. He turned into a completely unknown, random character, and here, his name is Kang Jiama. By accident, he bumps into a girl with blue hair. He gets scared when he realizes it's a woman. Clearly, he has some kind of trauma. He turns around and asks if she's okay, and she replies that she is, apologizing for the inconvenience. The luck our boy has is that this game is set in Korea. The names, locations, and geography were very similar. Thanks to this, he adapted easily. And you live as a simple teenager for almost a year. In this place, you can't even tell if this reality is a game. And there, he's living an ordinary life like anyone else. Then he arrives home, and his mother says he's the pride of the Kang clan. She shows him an acceptance letter. He had been admitted to the Joaquin Academy. He says he already knows about it and asks them to stop talking about it all the time. Meanwhile, his parents and his mother, I think, though her face is blurred, keep saying he's the pride of the family. Tomorrow was going to be the entrance ceremony, and they were all excited, asking if he was ready. He says he'll hurry. And that's how his dream of living a modest life was completely destroyed. Sitting in his chair, he thinks that tomorrow will be the day and there's no way out of it, considering how much everyone is expecting from him. He's asked countless times if he could quit, but it made no difference. He looks at the photo while thinking about how exhausted he is. In theory, it's all the fault of the real Kang Jiam who came before him. This kid managed to get accepted into this prestigious school. As soon as he arrived, he learned from the boy's parents that he had passed the test shortly before he took over this body. Of course, the parents don't know he took over, but our guy has no excuse. And considering how hard it is to get into this academy, he wonders if the boy was a genius, or maybe he had a blessing. Basically, special abilities. A concept very similar to what you find in games. However, not all humans have this kind of divine protection. That's because most powers are genetic. They depend on the presence or absence of blessings from the beginning. And society divides the rankings into noble, common, and privileged. That's how they maintain the power of the elite. A Draken Academy was founded with the purpose of training heroes. However, it has always been exclusive to the most important families, until recently when a special admission was introduced, and he, Kang Jiam, was one of the few accepted in this special way. The reason is obvious. Maybe it's because they need new heroes. Perhaps it's because of the monsters. But he needs to start remembering that this isn't his reality. This was a training school designed to prepare for war, very different from enlisting in the army. So lazily, he starts talking about his blessing. A window pops up. He mutters about how this status window is always weird. It showed that he had the blessing to negate pain. For 30 seconds, he wouldn't feel any pain at all, but the cooldown time was 12 hours. He's frustrated, saying this ability is going to be useless. It's almost depressing to see that this is all he has. However, he also has the blessing he received upon possessing this body, the blessing of the Sword God. Its effect is pretty simple. If he attacks, it will cut. It has no activation limit, but it only works with blades less than 30 centimeters long and 5 centimeters wide. Although he hadn't finished the game, he knew many abilities and had never heard of this one. Not to mention that this when you attack, you cut effect was way too simple. But what stands out the most is the activation condition, a sword shorter than 30 centimeters. Thinking it over, he imagines it's the exact size of a sashimi knife. Looking at all this, he has no idea what they expect from him. But life doesn't always go the way you want. And now he had finished preparing for this. Or not really, because he just remembered he needs to bring equipment. He knows that even an E-rank weapon costs millions, and anything above C-rank costs hundreds of millions. Meanwhile, A rank and S rank are priceless treasures. The problem is that just being at this school already costs a fortune, and he can't keep asking his parents for more money. The issue is that they're requiring him to bring equipment, so he'll have to bring something. He decides to visit a random shop, whatever works at this point. At least he remembers that Japanese knives are good for being sharp. Besides, a master shouldn't blame their equipment. The scene shifts to someone calling him a kid, asking what exactly he brought. Our guy stands there awkward, surrounded by a pile of convenience store sashimi knives. It's the day for weapon analysis during the entrance ceremony. He knows that anyone who doesn't bring good equipment will be marked and bullied by the wealthier students. The evaluator slams the table, asking if he thinks this academy is a joke. Why is this kid bringing a pile of kitchen knives to this place? Kang replies seriously that this is his equipment. The professor seems incredulous. He yells at the student, but our guy tells him to calm down. He explains that he was accepted through the new special system, and his family doesn't have money to spend on equipment. Our boy is wearing the badge that clearly shows he isn't from a wealthy family. To him, it's ridiculous that a professor of an educational institution that should treat everyone equally is being so prejudiced. He adds that, in the end, blaming equipment is something only amateurs would do. In his opinion, an expert doesn't blame the weapon. The professor is impressed by the boy's words of wisdom and confidence. To him, this unshakable spirit is incredible, and so he grants admission to student Kang. Our guy just says thank you. Meanwhile, some people in the background hear about the special admission and don't seem happy. The ugly ones are even saying he stinks. But the professor just tells everyone to shut up and leave as soon as the evaluation ends. He could be an angel or a demon, depending on what they said. Our guy just runs off to avoid getting involved with these lunatics. Outside, the day has barely started, and he already wants a break. He expected this kind of judgment, but going through it still doesn't feel good. At least he survived the evaluation, and now it's just the classroom qualification test. But now he's come too far. He knows he'll have to attend this school for the next 3 years. Looking around, it's completely different from what he saw on the screen. If he exaggerated a bit, he'd say it's the size of a small city, and he admits that the school is at least pretty cool. He remembers how he had to drop out of high school in the past due to family circumstances, so it's surreal to think this is actually happening. Then over the intercom, they announce that the tests are starting and instruct the new students to gather in the training area. He thinks everything is happening so fast, but a test is a test, and he's determined to give it his all. Except he forgot one small detail. He's never used a knife since arriving in this world, so there's nothing he can do. But he recalls the professor telling him never to let go of the knife, not even for a second. Our boy thinks that after 20 years of work, 1 year of rest wouldn't have made a difference. What's this? Was the kid already cutting sashimi at 2 years old? He pats the blade and says it's not that bad. First, he's going to try cutting with a knife. He pulls it from its sheath surrounded by a blue aura. The equipment meets the conditions, and the blessing of the sword god is activated. However, the user's physical body was too short. The equipment's level was also too low. Because of this, suppression would be used to synchronize the equipment to him. Our guy, however, is impressed that just pulling out of the packaging activated the ability. With that, the level 1 activation is complete. The system wishes him the blessing of the gods. He feels something approaching and starts screaming in agony. He realizes that at this rate, whatever is happening will kill him. An explosion occurs, and the boy creates a rupture and a digital pathway. What is this? He's as confused as we are and drops the knife on the ground. That's probably the right move. Reality seems to shatter, and he's back at the school. He notices that the moment he let go, everything returned to normal. So what kind of disaster was happening? The problem now is that he's got a splitting headache. He understands that the ability was activated. But why is this so-called blessing of the gods making the world fall apart? And the intense pain he's in now feels like the price for using the ability. If every activation feels like this, it means he can't use it. The intercom continues announcing for students to gather in the training field. Looking at the ground, he wonders if he can pick up the knife. He doesn't want to leave it there, abandoned in the middle of nowhere. He hesitates, but then picks it up by the handle. However, the moment he does, he feels a jolt like lightning and screams again. The scene shifts to the training hall. It's in the middle of a coliseum crowded with people. Apparently, these are the nobles talking about their children entering the school. And then they look to the side. Someone has arrived, the Sword Emperor. Siegfried von Nibelung. What a name. Apparently, he's a direct descendant of some Aaron Nibelung, a legendary hero. A chubby guy with messy hair says Siegfried is the strongest human alive. Siegfried lowers his head and looks to the side. Medea Poison has arrived. What a venomous name. Now it makes sense why our dear Kang was so into this game. She asks Siegfried if it hasn't been half a century since they last saw each other. He comments on how she's dressed at the academy and asks if she's going senile at 70. She replies that every woman wishes to stay beautiful until the end, and offers to use her power to make him 10 years younger if he wants. He retorts that even at 70, she hasn't grown, and he values character above all else. She laughs at him, saying he's the same as half a century ago. But she slyly notes that his presence here means things are changing. Normally, he hates mingling with the elite. Perhaps he's interested in his granddaughter, who's here. Siegfried ignores the comment, simply stating that things are about to begin. The artist decided to give everyone UJO-level hairstyles. Meanwhile, our boy is standing there with plain black hair, wondering if he's the only one with normal hair. Everyone is talking about how he's a special admission student. So this is what it means to come from humble origins. Then there's a sudden flash from the back and everyone's murmuring. He wonders who's arriving now. Ah, the blue-haired girl is here. He already knew she studied here. Abel von Nibelung, the granddaughter of the sword god himself, and more importantly, the heroine of that game, the reason he got addicted. Hot sneaky. The story explains that there's something called a subspace, a space separate from reality. Their attacks feel real, and you experience all the pain. However, since it doesn't interfere with actual reality, even murder is allowed there. What? Medea Poison is going all out. Calm down, artist. What's about to happen is a battle royale competition inside this subspace. Participants will be divided into groups of 10, and ranks will be based on survival. Medea explains there will be no equipment restrictions, and Siegfried points out that this gives the wealthy an advantage. She replies that they need some kind of edge since they're the ones funding the academy. She mentions that creating the special admission system was already a significant challenge for her. Kang is blushing in the crowd. She was so beautiful in 2D, but now just looking at her from afar, he feels shaken. Seeing the guys around, he feels sorry for them because he knows the game well. Abel von Nibelung is a player with a miracle blessing M. In other words, there's another protagonist who connects to her. In the end, beautiful people always have someone waiting for them, and our special admission boy has no chance, so it's better not to get involved. His goal is to live a peaceful, ordinary, and safe life, finish school without much trouble and work in a regular place. Then he sees in the paper that heroes always earn the highest salaries. But remembering the pain just from drawing that knife, he knows it's impossible for him. Those heroes can protect the world. He's aiming for a nice, comfortable desk job. A crystal in the sky suddenly announces the test for this year at Draken Academy. Wait, when did it change to Draken? What's going on? The crystal explains that the test will be a battle royale. Whoever is the last survivor will receive the star rank, the second and third place will receive the dragon rank. 4th to 7th will get the wolf rank, and 8th to 10th will be ranked as common trash. The scoring would be automatic, and there was no time limit. Our guy realizes it's exactly like the game. His goal is to finish as quickly as possible without drawing attention, staying ordinary. At that moment, the robot begins spreading a blue energy, announcing that the test has begun. May the blessing of the heroes be with you. Our boy just wants to avoid pulling out his weapon at any cost. The next scene. Almost everyone is already on the ground defeated. 24 groups have finished, and the top rankings are being announced. Siegfried comments that this year feels unfair. His granddaughter, along with descendants from the Shang and Jiu families, are competing, so the results were predictable. It's obvious. Abel finished her match in 7 minutes and 14 seconds. Even though it didn't break her grandfather's record, it's still one of the Academy's top 10 times. Siegfried says it's only natural for a descendant of Nibelung to have such talent. But now that things are wrapping up, he's leaving. Abel asks if he doesn't want to watch the other descendants, but he dismisses them as a bunch of pigs. What humility! He doesn't like nobles at all. Fair enough, he's the one who fought in the war and carries moral authority, and now he's walking away. But then the two are startled, and everyone is shocked. A strange energy surges through the area, and Abel asks if he felt it too. Looking at the crowd, Siegfried is alarmed. He can't understand where it's coming from. Something catches their attention. A blue light appears in the sky. They look up as the space begins to shatter. Pieces fall to the ground, exploding among the students. People are asking if someone fell from the alternate space. Once again, the sky flashes and Siegfried is watching. A small knife falls in front of someone. Media orders the medics to be called and tells the cadets to help. And lying there, who is it? Yep, you guessed it, our guy. The outcome is already decided. A blonde boy yells, claiming he'll take out that bastard, but another grabs him by the neck. The blonde gets punched in the face, and that's when Kang realizes he's in the battle royale. The Jun family brothers are notorious for their brutality. Kang is horrified to see that instead of killing people outright, they've been torturing them for over 30 minutes. What he doesn't understand is why they're leaving him alone. Is he so weak they don't even consider him worth fighting? One brother, holding the blonde by the neck, asks if he's dead yet. He throws another person to the ground and complains that this is getting boring. He starts counting the remaining people. He looks at his brother and says he's been killing too fast and should slow down. But then he stomps on another person, crushing them. He apologizes sarcastically, saying that's another one down. He points to a girl and tells his brother, "You can have her for some fun." The girl is clearly terrified. Hiding nearby, Kang doesn't know what to do. When the torture started, everyone panicked, but that didn't change how the brothers acted. The red-clad brother starts walking toward the girl. He comments that she's just his type and that he's already imagining the screams coming from her mouth. The blue-clad brother calls him a pervert, even though they're siblings. But the red brother insists he's just going to start ripping her apart. Suddenly someone yells, calling them damn bastards. It's Kang asking if they're psychopaths. Even though this is a separate space, what they're doing is too much. The brothers ignore his words and wonder who the new guy is. They quickly realized he's a special admission student. The red brother says he'll crush Kang's head in no time. It seems the girl has slipped back into reality. The red brother adds that for the insult, he'll start by ripping out Kang's tongue. Kang is panicking, wondering what to do. He could use the ability to nullify pain, but it only lasts 30 seconds, and these guys have been here for half an hour. Then he remembers something, the sashimi knife in his bag. The problem is that he knows the moment he touches it, the ability will activate, but it's his only option. The brothers are startled when he pulls out the knife, glowing with a blue aura. Kang thought they'd be scared, but instead they laugh at him. They ask if he's joking with that thing. The girl is still alive, much to Kang's relief. The red brother laughs, saying Kang's death will be as painless as possible since he's so amusing. Then he lunges forward, claiming he'll crush Kang's head. Kang activates the pain-nullifying ability for 30 seconds. At least combined with the other blessing, this might be his only shot at victory. He starts drawing the blade and the blessing activates instantly. The red brother is still mocking him, asking what he plans to do with a kitchen knife. Kang knows it's now or never. Cut or be killed. The problem is, it's not a fish, it's a human body. He recalls wondering why gangsters in movies always use sashimi knives. They really cut through people. His boss back then told him it was impossible. But Kang knows the description of the blessing says that if he attacks, it will cut. The blade slices through, and the chubby brother watches in horror as his arm goes flying. The severed limb hits the ground with a thud. We flash back to a scene in the kitchen. Kang had once asked if gangsters eat sashimi. The knife had hit the wall, startling him, and his mentor yelled, "Call me master." He wanted to know why Kang cared so much about it. It turns out Kang's first mentor was a former gangster. The man had cut off one of his own hands as punishment for his past crimes. Kang, clueless as ever, had asked about the scenes he'd seen in movies. He wanted to know if it was the same in reality. The mentor explained that when you stab someone, their skin and organs contract. That's why it's easier to stab multiple times than to make a clean cut. He also explained that's why fish are sliced lying down carefully. Standing upright, you couldn't even tear a piece of bread. When Kang suggested that maybe the mentor just wasn't skilled enough, he got another smack. The mentor declared it impossible. But now, with the chubby brother's arm flying off, maybe it wasn't so impossible after all. The severed arm hits the ground and the brother screams in agony, clutching his stump. He has no idea what just happened, while Kang calmly advances. In panic, the brother yells for help and runs toward his sibling. But his red-clad brother stands frozen, fear evident on his face. The red brother leaps forward, shouting that this brat is going to slice them both up. But Kang makes another move, cutting him clean through like a sheet of paper. The fallen brother watches in shock as his sibling is sliced. Looking down, he sees a piece of his brother's head staring back at him. He screams, calling out for his brother Chum, while Kang stands silently. A red-haired observer watches from the sidelines, clearly stunned. The blue-clad brother tries to compose himself, reasoning that they are in the void space. Still, who is this boy? Worse, judging by his technique, he seems like an amateur. Maybe it was some kind of fluke or strange coincidence. But one thing is certain, he needs to be cautious of that knife. He concludes that his brother lost due to recklessness, equipping a defensive blessing and another that boosts his jump by 200%. He also activates a spiritual damage bonus for his fists. He declares that with these three powers manifesting simultaneously, it's time to show Kang his true strength. He doesn't know where Kang got that knife, but even an S-rank weapon couldn't harm his fists. Meanwhile, Kang is standing still, counting seconds. He's at 21. The blue brother charges in, claiming he's different from his sibling. If Kang stays still, he'll crush his head. But suddenly, we're down to 5 seconds and Kang wonders what just happened. Did Kang just use him as a target for a throwing knife? The blue brother is left dazed, not understanding what's happening. With 2 seconds left, then 1, he finally loses consciousness. At that moment, the effect of the blessing ends and Kang starts screaming in pain. Sometime later, Kang opens his eyes. He's in an unfamiliar place that looks like a hospital. As he gets up, a blonde boy opens the door and runs outside, announcing that the student is awake. Someone enters the room and Kang immediately recognizes the face, not personally, but from stories. The man before him destroyed the Demon Lord's Legion 50 years ago. One of the 7 heroes of the 7 stars. The strongest man in humanity, Siegfried. The Academy Director Medea greets him. Kang wonders why they're both here. Siegfried asks for his name, and Kang introduces himself. Siegfried gets straight to the point, asking what Kang did during the test. Even if Kang isn't sure himself, it's clear he was the one who caused everything. Kang notices Siegfried's hand resting on his sword. There's no way he could stand a chance against a monster like this. Kang nervously says that he knows he went too far during the evaluation and is willing to face the consequences. Siegfried simply observes him. Medea intervenes, telling Siegfried to stop intimidating the boy. She approaches Kang, explaining that Siegfried cleared his meridians while he was unconscious. She adds that she's interested in Kang. Siegfried scolds Medea for acting so casually with a new student. Kang is thoroughly confused, wondering why the sword master helped him and why Medea is so close. Medea explains that she watched the footage of the test while he was unconscious. Seeing him risk everything to protect another student moved her. She's even fawning over him, calling him a hero. Siegfried once again tells her to show some dignity. Medea turns to Kang, saying they're not going to punish him for his actions today. However, she mentions that the 2 brothers from the Mao family seem ready to drop out of school. Kang feels a bit confused, but is at least relieved he won't have to share space with those 2. Siegfried then says they have something important to tell him. Kang Jiamo was the top student in this evaluation. Kang is baffled. His goal was to live a calm and quiet life without drawing attention. Sometime later in Medea's office, she reflects on her nearly 20 years as the Academy president, admitting this is the first time something like this has ever happened. Our boy responded that he didn't like this whole top student business. Naturally, both Siegfried and Medea were confused. They asked if he didn't understand what it meant to be part of the star class. They explained that the decision was made by the subspace itself. After a moment, Kang said he still didn't want to accept it. Siegfried was puzzled. Back in Medea's office, she asked Siegfried if he was angry that the boy had taken his granddaughter's spot. He replied that it made no sense to go against the will of the subspace since it was designed to find heroes. If Kang was chosen as the best cadet, they would respect that decision. The issue, he said, was that if Kang had incredible abilities, he would have understood. If Kang had an exceptional physique, he would have accepted. And if Kang brought extraordinary experience, he would have agreed. But Kang was just a boy who hadn't even fully matured. Yet, it was undeniable that the cuts and movements he used carried a master-level concept of swordsmanship, something Siegfried had been searching for his entire life. Even more shocking, upon examining Kang's body, Siegfried found it was fragile and unconditioned, with no signs of physical training. It was as if something impossible existed within him. For the first time in a long while, Siegfried felt a strange sense of competitiveness. He wanted to understand how this was possible, The problem was that he couldn't fathom how a boy his granddaughter's age could possess such skills. Media, being her usual eccentric self, joked that maybe, despite his age, Kang was worth trying something with. She asked Siegfried for his opinion. He asked if she knew what people at the academy called women like her. She dared him to say it out loud. Siegfried spelled it out letter by letter. B-I-T-C-H. Media lost her mind, but we're back to Kang now. It seems he managed to get himself downgraded to the wolf class. That's the best he could do, as all he wanted was to avoid being the top student. Not long ago, there was heated debate about putting him in one of the best classes, or at least in the tiger class. But Media insisted that the matter would remain a secret. Kang's plan was to join a weaker class and live quietly, avoiding the power struggles of the stronger groups. Considering everything that happened, ending up in the wolf class wasn't too bad. When he enters the classroom, everyone turns to stare at him. Obviously, it's because of the badge on his chest. After a moment, they return to their conversations, and Kang relaxes, hoping they'll stop looking at him. All he wants is to be ignored. As he sits down, relieved that no one is talking to him, he feels the peace of being a solitary man with his own lifestyle. Then someone calls out to him. He turns and sees the red-haired girl from earlier. She thanks him for everything he did. He doesn't respond, so she clarifies that she's talking about the test. She used formal honorifics, which felt unnecessary since they were the same age. Kang tells her there's no need to thank him. Anyone would have done the same in that situation. At that moment, he feels like a hypocrite. Everyone thinks he saved the girl out of heroism, but he was just trying to save himself. He introduces himself as Kang Jiama. She introduces herself as Klo. Kang politely says it's nice to meet her, and that he didn't expect them to be in the same class. Internally, though, he's wondering who Klo is. After playing the game countless times, he has no idea who this girl is. He knows the main story begins later, during the war against the demon tribe. If Klo doesn't appear there, it means she's just another ordinary person like him. He asks her to keep everything that happened a secret, and she agrees. Then Klo says she wants to ask him something, but the professor interrupts, telling everyone to sit down. They agree to talk later. The professor slams a notebook on the desk and congratulates the class on their admission. He announces that they now carry the pride of the hero Valor Joaquin. He introduces himself as Lee Wanbin, the wolf class instructor. He orders everyone to change into their physical training uniforms. Training starts in 30 minutes. A boy with glasses asks what today's training objective is. Kang guesses the answer before it's even said: Saitama's regimen. He wonders if this means everyone will end up bald. Kang approaches the instructor, who immediately asks what Kang Jiama wants. Kang is confused about how the instructor already knows his name. He says he isn't feeling well. The professor ponders for a moment. He remarks that such basic training might not be helpful for the school's top cadet and suggests Kang should go to the star class instead. Kang immediately knows that Medea must have told all the instructors. He quickly clarifies that he only needs to use the bathroom and will return to start the training. Outside, Kang begins running with the others, or more accurately, behind them, as he's clearly unfit. He's struggling and hasn't even finished the warm-up. Klo catches up to him and asks if it's really that hard. Kang denies it, insisting he's fine. He had already completed 5 laps, so he was making decent progress. However, she mentioned she was already on her 9th lap. The poor guy was confused. She simply told him to keep trying and ran ahead. He never imagined he was this unprepared. Later, after the training back at home surrounded by empty bottles, he slammed one on the table. The poor guy was exhausted and starving. After just 1 week at the academy, he encountered an unexpected problem. The scene shifts to the cafeteria. He entered, desperate, saying he was starving and asked for pork. However, the lady at the counter looked to the side and asked where his meal ticket was. That's when he realized he needed a ticket to get food. He told her not to worry and that he'd go get one. But when he saw the price minus 50,000, he was devastated. Now he sat there, drinking whatever he could afford, leaning against the wall, frustrated that this place charged so much for food. It was nearly what he used to spend in an entire month to survive. Suddenly, a system notification appeared, stating that his physical stats had reached level 12. The more power he gained, the fewer restrictions would apply. Additionally, he could now wield a weapon up to 38 centimeters long. This made him realize that his efforts hadn't been in vain. Looking in the mirror, he noticed his body was becoming more defined. His evolution was progressing rapidly, likely thanks to the blessing of the sword god. As the effects increased, perhaps soon he'd be able to wield a small sword. On the day of the ceremony, he had been afraid to use a sword, but now, when he wasn't holding one, he felt strange. He began to wonder if this system was messing with his psyche. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. He opened it and asked who it was. It was Klo, who politely asked if she could come in. She asked if she was bothering him, and he replied no, as he had just been lying down. She mentioned she hadn't seen him in the cafeteria all week and wanted to know if he was okay. He said he was fine, explaining that he brought food from other places. She said she understood, and he told her not to worry. She then explained that she was planning to cook dinner and wanted to buy some ingredients, but it seemed he wasn't interested. In the very next moment, he was already outside, telling her to hurry up. Walking ahead, he mentioned he could cook and would take care of it. Some time passed, and she had already finished her meal, praising how delicious it was. He noticed that all the food was gone. He said he checked the fridge and found a lot of fish. Curious, he asked why there was so much. She explained that she lived near the beach, and he commented that it was perfect because his specialty was cooking fish. He decided to prepare another dish to show off his sashimi skills. The problem was the sword god's blessing. He asked if she had a long knife that looked like a sword. She showed him her sword and asked if it would work. He said never mind and decided to handle it differently. He concluded he'd have to finish it in 30 seconds. Activating the blessing to remove pain and the sword god's blessing, he managed to prepare the fish completely in 21 seconds. Even he was impressed with the masterpiece he had created. She asked how he was so good at cooking. He replied that he had worked part-time at a Japanese restaurant. She, however, didn't even seem to know what part-time work was. Noticing the gap in their social statuses, he simply said he was happy she enjoyed the meal. She then said not to worry about the dishes. She would handle them. He went outside to observe the moon. At that moment, after a week of hard work, he felt completely satisfied. However, there was a loud commotion inside. He turned to see that Chloe clearly had never washed dishes before. Suddenly, a book fell off a shelf and some pages opened. He noticed it looked like a diary and accidentally started reading. It mentioned how she had received help from someone during class today and felt she needed to repay the favor. He thought it was cute that she had a diary at her age covered in stickers. Without meaning to, he flipped through and read another line. It said the person who saved her was in the same class, and now her heart wouldn't stop racing. She wanted to talk to him but didn't know how. Kang thought he would feel shy, but instead he found it adorable. Now he was curious and decided to read a little more. Turning another page, he found a bunch of I love you written everywhere. Good grief, he thought. Maybe it's time to run. Just then, Chloe saw what he had seen. She dropped her glass and asked if he had read it. The story then shifts to Chloe's family background. Heroic families gain honor by killing monsters. However, within these institutions, there are always those who exploit the weak. To handle problems that other families couldn't resolve directly, an organization of shadows emerged, a family known as Cecilia. This family used assassination to maintain order. Because of this, children born into the family underwent mental conditioning before puberty. They suppressed their emotions and endured harsh training, all to become assassins before the age of 15. That was the age when Chloe killed for the first time. An old man told her she shouldn't deny her talent as an assassin. It was something she heard repeatedly before reaching adulthood. The constant training distorted her mentality and created a shadow that hit her heart. Long before she could recover, it was already time to enter the academy. Any child from the Cecilia family would undoubtedly qualify for the dragon class or higher. However, they always ended up in the lower common classes due to family tradition. The old man warned her never to draw attention to herself. That's how Chloe realized that even at the academy, she couldn't do as she pleased. She decided to accept her family's fate since there was no escape. She thought everything at this place would be predictable until someone appeared. Our boy yelled at those bastards to stop and asked if they had lost their minds. In that subspace, Chloe was meant to experience death for the first time. She wasn't afraid, knowing it was part of the plan to remain in a weak class. Calmly, she was ready to face death because that was how she had always lived. But the fate that seemed so clear and defined was severed at that moment. It was as if the sun had broken through the clouds. At that moment, she saw someone wielding their sword for a purpose beyond themselves. He stood in front of her to protect her. As a child, she used to read a bedtime story about a princess trapped in a castle and the person the princess loved. At that moment, her face turned red and her heart felt like it would explode. She could only think of one thing. Was this the feeling called love? Back in the present, Kang was confused. The tension in the air was palpable, and he felt awkward as they stared at each other. He had no idea what to do or why she seemed so upset. Trying to change the mood, he commented on how beautiful the moon was that night. He thanked her for the meal and said he was leaving. As he waved goodbye, she asked if he had seen it. He asked what she meant. She said, obviously, that. Embarrassed, he stammered, saying that if it was about the book, he hoped she was studying hard. But she knew it was the diary. Kang wondered why this girl acted like she had gold on her back. The problem was that in that moment, she seemed like a completely different person. He kept insisting he hadn't seen anything, but she kept pressing him to stop lying. After some back and forth, he admitted that he had seen it. The instant he confessed, he felt a shift in the atmosphere as Chloe began drawing her sword. Kang was bewildered, wondering why she was doing this. Looking out the window, he realized he was on the 4th floor, making it impossible to jump. The only way out was through the door, but he was trapped in the room with her. At this moment, he couldn't understand why she was acting like this. As she dragged the sword along the ground, slowly advancing, Kang noticed her lifeless eyes and motionless pupils. Her face was void of emotion. He was certain now she was a yandere. It dawned on him that during their conversations, she would suddenly shift her energy. Now that she was acting entirely differently, it was clear she had two personalities. Reading the diary had been the trigger for this behavior, and her intent to kill him was stronger than even those brothers. Kang began thinking of a way to escape. Since he had cut the fish in 21 seconds, he still had 9 seconds left of the blessing's effect to use. The problem was that his sashimi knife was in his room. The knife he had used to cut the fish was nearby, but with her current posture, she would sever his arm or head before he could grab it. Then he spotted a box cutter on the table. At that moment, Chloe lunged at him. Kang grabbed the box cutter, wishing he could have resolved this through conversation. He activated the sword god's blessing, which proclaimed, "May the blessing be with you." As Chloe charged, Kang commented that her hair was a bit long. He made a clean cut, and in the next scene, Chloe was lying on the floor. When she woke up, she seemed disoriented, asking where Jiamo was. She recalled looking back at him when he was by the window, while she'd been washing dishes. She wondered where her katana was, then noticed it lying nearby, feeling relieved. She remembered that she often lost consciousness when using the katana. Most of the time after killing someone, her only memory would be the old man praising her and reminding her never to deny her talent as an assassin. She fell face first onto her pillow, frustrated about fainting just when he had been in her room. She felt like her head was about to explode. Chloe wondered if she had said anything strange while unconscious. That's when she noticed the box cutter on the floor and questioned why it was there. She touched her hair and realized it was shorter, becoming confused. Looking in the trash, she saw the hair he had trimmed and disposed of. As the unstable yandere she was, she interpreted this as an act of kindness. She thought he was incredibly gentle for even giving her a haircut. She immediately opened her diary and began writing about how much she loved Jiama. Meanwhile, outside, Kang was throwing up. Somehow, he had managed to escape the situation by activating the blessing. The problem was that he had used the ability for 5 seconds longer than the remaining 9 seconds, leaving him completely drained. Sitting on a bench, he thought about how all the energy from dinner was gone. He began questioning why Chloe fought the way she did. Normally, a swordsman would aim to disarm or immobilize their opponent. However, Chloe's fighting style made it abundantly clear her intent was always to kill. Without hesitation, she aimed for vital points with her attacks. It was almost as if she was a specialist in ambushes. When she attacked him, he genuinely felt his life was in danger. Instinctively, he tried to cut off her head. Thankfully, the box cutter was too short, and she only ended up with a haircut. Afterward, it seemed she fainted, and he was grateful that everything worked out in the end. Life at the academy was far from easy. Kang remembered that before falling into this game, he had been a more ambitious person. In the world he came from, he had stood at the pinnacle as a master of sashimi knives. But here, in this world, everyone seemed bound to their role. The game was called Blessing of Miracles because that was the blessing the true protagonist would receive. There was also the blessing of valor from a figure named Baylor Dwaken. As far as Kang could remember, these were the only legendary blessings in the game. The main mission was to save the world from the Demon King. The protagonist was chosen by the Holy Sword and the Demon Sword known as Balmon. Meanwhile, Kang had been chosen by a sashimi knife. He slapped himself, trying to make sense of why he had been thrown into this situation. All these events at the academy were making him forget what his original goals were. While he had some knowledge of the key characters, he didn't fully understand how this world worked. What he did know was that he had been at the academy for a week, and according to the game's storyline, the time had come. The protagonist's blessing should have activated by now, and he would begin attending the academy. This meant the real story was about to start. Even though Kang hadn't completed the game, he at least knew the first half. For now, the best course of action was to stick to the official storyline. If you remember correctly, the major events would kick off in the second semester of the third year. At that point, sensing the birth of a new hero, the demon race would launch an attack on the academy. This battle would escalate into a full-scale war between demons and humanity. That's when a world war would begin. It was undeniable that the plot was incredibly cliched. It was during this stage of the story that Kang, who had only been playing for the wafus and fun, decided to stop playing. But the terrifying part was that this war was inevitable in this world. The question now was whether he would die in the process. For now, at least he had 3 days to prepare, either to find a way to escape this fantasy world or, in the worst case, to get stronger and survive. There was a game full of wafus and meant for people to enjoy themselves, so surely there had to be a happy ending somewhere. The protagonist of this world would undoubtedly survive, but Kang needed power to protect himself. At the same time, he couldn't draw too much attention to himself. Otherwise, he would also be drafted to fight against the Demon King's army. Today's events made Kang realize he needed to be much more careful when using the Blessing of Pain. He checked his own stats and saw that his performance was quite impressive. Strangely, it seemed as though more information appeared on the interface every day. Some stats like mental strength were straightforward enough, but there was one that confused him: assimilation rate. He clicked on it, but a window popped up stating that access was restricted. The more he tried to understand, the more questions arose. For now, the most important thing was that he needed a real weapon. He couldn't just keep relying on the Blessing of Pain for 30 seconds every time. That meant he needed a sword that wouldn't trigger the blessing. Fortunately, he knew that the following month there would be a series of exams, and the reward for completing the training was a sword called Murasame. It was a rank B blade, and if he could master it, it would be enough to graduate from the academy. Its size ensured that the sword god's blessing wouldn't activate, so he could use it as his primary weapon. In the end, he would have to do more than he wanted. That's when someone called out to him, and he turned to look. With cyan-colored hair, it was obvious who it was. Looking battered, she announced that this was her spot. Our boy just stared at her, looking dumbfounded and unsure of what to say. He stood there frozen. "Say something, man," she yelled, asking if he could move aside. "Bossy much?" The poor otaku stood there thinking how surreal she looked, no matter how many times he saw her. He spaced out for a second without even realizing it. It seemed like he was about to get up, but she said he didn't need to leave, just sit next to her. Even though she was beautiful, he wondered what this nonsense about the bench being hers was about. After all, it was a public space. But he decided to avoid any conversation to steer clear of the heroine of this story. Still, the girl looked so battered that he couldn't stop glancing at her, thinking how stunningly beautiful she was. Out of nowhere, she looked up and said she liked sitting there because the stars were most visible from that spot. Caught off guard, Kang didn't know what to say, clearly struggling with his poor social skills. He began to wonder if this really was Abel, the granddaughter of the Sword Saint, the protagonist who was notoriously hard to approach. She turned to him and asked if he also used a sword. Our boy was confused as to how she knew that. She explained that her grandfather had told her. He mentioned that swordsmen have a distinct look in their eyes, making Kang worry for a moment that his secret had been exposed. Kang remained perplexed. Her colorful hair, those antenna-like strands, and her sharp, slanted eyes, was it just Kang's imagination, or did she kind of look like an insect? Abel asked if he wanted to hold her sword, confirming she knew he recognized her. Kang was confused since he didn't think she suspected him of anything. However, he found it odd that she asked that, given everyone at the school knew who Abel was. He admitted he sort of knew her. In response, she said she didn't know him, leaving him even more confused about her intentions. Abel commented that it was a bit cliché for him to know her name while she didn't know his. Kang, uninterested in getting involved, asked why he should reveal his name to someone he had just met. She explained it was always good to know people. After all, he could be a spy for the Demon King. She added that it was odd for him to be alone at night in a place where she usually trained. At that moment, Kang realized he was being threatened as she rested her hand on her sword. Quickly, he turned the tables, suggesting she could also be a spy for being there. She clarified that she was training, to which he replied that he was too. Curious, Abel asked what kind of training left him so calm. He mentioned it was breathing exercises. Kang noticed several wounds on her hands. When she realized, she tried to hide her arm. He paused and complimented her dedication. Abel confirmed it, explaining that people didn't understand the burden of carrying Siegfried's bloodline. She elaborated that she needed to be perfect at all times because any sign of weakness would attract opportunists. She then mentioned that this year, she wasn't the top student. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she confessed it was the first time she'd been defeated by someone. Despite that, she smiled and admitted it was somewhat of a relief. However, she was also curious to find out who had beaten her, making it clear she wanted to defeat them next time. Kang asked if she needed to take it so seriously. She replied that it was a matter of pride. Abel even begged her grandfather to reveal who the person was, only to learn they weren't even in her class. The worst part was that the individual had only recently joined the school. Realizing she was sharing too much, Abel apologized, saying she shouldn't be talking about such things with someone she had just met. Intrigued, Kang asked why she was telling him all of this. She answered it was because he seemed weak. She emphasized that her family's motto was to be firm with the strong and kind to the weak. Kang, finally understanding her kindness, realized she thought he was trash. Now it made sense why it was so difficult to approach this complicated girl in the game. Kang said he was tired and thought it was time to leave. He wished her a good night, but she turned and asked when he planned to tell her his name. The scene shifted to the classroom. Life at the academy had been calmer than Kang had expected. Chloe quickly made new friends and blended in with the class, while Kang avoided eye contact. Whenever she approached him, her other friends would cast judgmental looks. But Kang didn't care about those cold stares, likely because he was a special student. Besides, he wasn't the only special student in the Tiger class this year. Kang thought it was great he ended up in this class. At the start of this semester, the Star and Dragon classes typically started forming political factions. Even when playing the game, he had found that nonsense irritating. He was glad he didn't have to deal with it. Walking with his phone in hand, he wondered what he should eat that day. Then he received a black card from none other than Medea herself, along with an apology for forgetting to give it to him earlier. Apparently, it was her personal card. Kang was stunned. This is what being a sugar baby feels like, he thought. Still, the best part for him was that, up until this point, he hadn't disrupted the flow of events. If he kept this pace for the next 3 years, the future he envisioned would become a reality. He wasn't sure why he was so optimistic, considering the war that loomed in the future. Later, a professor was giving a lecture about a war 700 years ago. It was between the Demon King and the hero Draken. After the war, Draken decided to create the next generation of heroes, founding the academy with his 7 disciples. The professor emphasized that this material would be on the test. Kang was nearly falling asleep. Having played the game many times, he remembered this part well. The lecture focused on the founder, Draken Baylor, who fought against demon commanders for over 20 years and led humanity against the entire demon army. During a battle with a commander Lycan, he lost an arm, rendering him unable to fight again. At the end of the first war, the battlefield was soaked in blood and there wasn't a clear victor. However, it resulted in a truce between demons and humans. That was when Draken established the academy. The professor reminded them this all happened 700 years ago and was why they had peace today. The students began wondering if such a war could happen in their generation. Kang knew the answer all too well. 700 years of peace were about to come to an end. It would be wise to tell Medea about this, but Kang had no idea what consequences that might bring. Even though she often seemed like one of those people who wanted to leave the academy as soon as possible, Abel was also the first person to awaken an anomaly thanks to the Lord Poet. She was the first of the 7 heroes to step forward and protect the students. Kang hadn't played much of the game, but he knew what happened. Where did her stomach go? It vanished. She was the first to be sacrificed by the Demon King. Our boy wished he didn't know this would happen. The professor wrapped up the lecture, thanking everyone for their attention and reminding them to prepare for the upcoming exam in 2 weeks. As the students began leaving the classroom, they were talking excitedly about something. Kang stayed at his desk, wondering what was going on. That's when he seemed to remember. It was May 5th. He glanced at his phone case. The students by the door were talking about how there was no way he was going to their class and was probably destined for the star class. Kang already knew what they meant. It was on May 5th that the so-called protagonist of this world arrived, Leon von Reinhardt. With him also came the beginning of the end of 700 years of peace. Kang already hated this guy whose face was ridiculously cliché. Just like in the stories, every woman falls in love with him. Kang wished this was an R-rated tale where handsome guys like him usually die quickly. Leon's charisma had already ensnared Rachel, the Saint of the Sword, Saki Ryojo, the daughter of the Saint of the Bow, and even Dear Abel. The protagonist party members were remarkable. The guy was insufferable, but his blessing of miracles made him the first person to be recruited for the hero's journey. Actually, recruit was putting it lightly. People were forced to go to war. Kang also knew that the hero Valor had only been able to defeat the first commander of the Legion. Thinking about how powerful the true Demon King must be was surreal. He wondered if this was one of those crazy stories where the protagonist loses in the end. Leon, with his radiant smile, greeted the students as he passed. But then, he looked to the side and noticed Kang, flashing him a grin as well. Kang immediately sensed something strange but reminded himself of what the blessing of miracles was capable of. He was certain the protagonist would handle everything. After all, Leon had that trustworthy aura that made it seem like he'd solve any problem. Suddenly, something caught Kang's attention, and the scene shifted to the training hall. There he was swinging a sword. Because it was a longer blade, the blessing of the sword god didn't activate, allowing him to practice without interference. He desperately needed to develop at least the basics of swordsmanship. A little earlier, Rachel had approached him, asking if she had done something wrong that day. Kang almost lost his cool but didn't want to dwell on it, especially since they have to spend at least a year together. To keep the peace, he simply said everything was fine. She was relieved to hear that. Kang, however, was deeply confused, trying to figure out her identity. Not to mention how she could wield a sword even when unconscious. Her expression seemed to plead for help, while her sword radiated murderous intent. If it was purely about killing, she was undoubtedly more dangerous than the evil brothers. Rachel apologized for what happened that day and asked if she could make it up to him with another dinner. She promised to do her best, even if her cooking skills weren't as good as his. Kang, however, vividly remembered her brandishing a sword and hesitated. The problem was the way she was almost glowing as she begged. It was hard to refuse, but he couldn't help imagining himself waking up tomorrow morning, sliced into pieces in the fridge. That's when he seemed to have an idea. Instead of dinner, he asked if she could do him a favor. Rachel looked confused, and Kang said it was something only she could help with. Blushing, she asked what it was. Kang asked her to teach him swordsmanship. Back to the training hall, Kang realized he urgently needed a teacher to teach him the basics. Chloe, with the sword in her hand, was utterly terrifying. Every night before bed, Kang watched YouTube videos on how to survive a Yandir. When Chloe arrived, all cheerful, asking when he'd gotten there, Kang was ready. He replied that he had just arrived. Chloe said she'd been waiting for him, mentioning she had gotten there early, around 6:30. Kang, puzzled, asked why she was so early when they had agreed to meet at 8. He already knew she was a bit unhinged. She looked at him innocently, asking if something was wrong. Kang found himself momentarily distracted by her toned abs, finally understanding why she was so strong. Chloe handed him a sword and asked why they weren't using real ones. Kang was startled. What kind of person trains with a real sword? He explained that since it was just training, they should use wooden swords to avoid injuries. Chloe smiled sweetly, saying he was so kind for not wanting to hurt her. Gripping the hilt, she swung the sword, creating a sharp whoosh in the air. Kang broke into a cold sweat, wondering how someone could cut through the air so cleanly. He realized he needed to be careful, as even the wooden sword could shatter his skull. Checking the system, he confirmed everything was fine for now. The blessing of the sword god hadn't activated. The only thing that still confused him was the synchronization stat. He was studying the system when Chloe called out to him, asking if something was wrong. Only now did Kang fully realize that he was the only one who would see the system. Turning to her, he said, "Today's my first day, so maybe go easy on me." Kang prepared himself and asked if they could start. In his past life, he had always been the type to value practice. It was like a saying, seeing is believing. He knew that to master any area, sacrificing flesh and blood alone wasn't enough. One had to be willing to give their entire being. All the progress he was making at the academy came from his ability to observe himself and learn how to self-correct. He noticed his hands were sweaty, and his stance was off. He reminded himself that the essence of swordsmanship was to strike the opponent precisely. At that moment, Chloe leaped toward him. It seemed he wasn't fully prepared as the blade was already near his neck. For a second, it wasn't clear if he dodged or if she nicked his cheek. Panicking, he yelled at her, asking why she wasn't going easy as he requested. Chloe switched the blade to her other hand and prepared another strike. Kang managed to block it, but the force flung his arm upward, leaving him trembling. Feeling confident after blocking, he decided to attempt a counterstrike, but Chloe was already in the air. He was left questioning how she seemed to get faster with every move. Maybe her first attack had just been a test. He blocked again, but the impact cracked the wooden hilt, and Kang was pushed backward. Chloe continued her barrage of strikes, and while Kang seemed to hold his defense, the strength of her blows made him fear for his life. Worse, he couldn't find an opening to counterattack. Suddenly, his wooden sword shattered. She apologized, saying she hadn't meant to break it, but admitted she didn't think it was that fragile. Then Chloe froze. Breaking the sword had shortened its length, meeting the activation conditions for the blessing of the sword god. The system began altering Kang's personality, reducing his humanity and activating the heat. Chloe instinctively backed away, visibly frightened as Kang became shrouded in a dark aura. The system announced that his humanity was slipping away. Suddenly, the scene shifted. Kang found himself under a spotlight, standing in his old kitchen. Confused, he wondered where he was and if everything had been a dream. He noticed a fish and remembered he was supposed to be preparing it. He figured he should get back to work. Maybe he should use the chef's Chinese knife after so long, he thought. But the system interrupted, saying he couldn't choose that item. Kang was puzzled. He tried another knife, but the system rejected that one too. Once again, his only option was the sashimi knife. Reluctant, he feared the pain the system would inflict, but when he held it, he felt fine. In fact, he felt rejuvenated. He didn't know what was controlling him, but he declared it was time to create a masterpiece. The heat activated. Meanwhile, Chloe was screaming his name, asking if he was okay. Amidst the haze, Kang began pacing back and forth. Then, in a flash of blue light, he disappeared and reappeared before Chloe in an instant. She barely managed to block, but the impact sent her flying. Chloe hit the ground hard, coughing up blood. She realized Kang had become a completely different person in mere moments. Honestly, after this, you couldn't blame her for being a yandere. Kang was acting just like one of those insane protagonists. He attacked again and Chloe narrowly dodged. She struggled to get up, unable to believe she had been thrown back by a single strike. She could barely stand and questioned what was happening to Jianma. She couldn't understand why he was acting this way, but she knew they had to stop the fight immediately. Chloe urged him to stop, but Kang, consumed by the system's influence, pressed on. She realized she couldn't avoid the next strike and started pleading for him to halt. Back in Kang's mental world, the cooked version of him was bewildered. It was the first time he had seen a fish dodging his cuts. The fish was loud, and strangest of all, it seemed to be speaking. He listened closely and realized it was saying his name, Jianma. Looking at the knife, he remembered that he was Jianma. Suddenly, the student version of Kang appeared in the kitchen. In that moment, he recognized the fish for what it truly was, Chloe, pleading with him to wake up. The sword slammed against the wall, missing her by a hair. Kang barely managed to release the sword before it struck her head. Chloe opened her eyes, stunned she hadn't been hit. Suddenly, Kang pulled her by the waist. The setup seemed perfect for a kiss, but that would have made him a dangerous creep. Thankfully, he wasn't that kind of guy. Instead, he told her it would be better to stop for today. Chloe asked if he was okay, but Kang casually thanked her for the practice and said he was leaving. This lunatic almost killed her and walked away after saying 2 words. On her way back to her room, Chloe thought about the day of the test. She realized that Kang's ability wasn't just about raw power. It carried a strange energy. It wasn't simply a skill. It seemed like he was being controlled by pure instinct. And even though it seemed to have activated unconsciously, Chloe stood no chance against him. Worse, he was using that broken sword. She had always known Kang was strong, but not like this. Suddenly, someone spoke, commenting that she seemed to be enjoying herself. Chloe's expression instantly changed. Standing in front of her was Nox Audior, a second-year student, whom Chloe addressed as her brother. Nox asked if, since entering the academy, she had been associating only with insignificant people like this. Chloe immediately snapped at him, telling him not to call someone else that. Nox smirked, noting Kang's name and warning her that if she continued associating with him, the Audior family would eliminate him. Chloe lowered her head and walked away, saying that even if all of them came after Kang, they wouldn't be able to handle him. The conversation was brief and she was already gone. Nox, however, lingered, pondering the name he had just heard. Meanwhile, Kang was beginning to realize that the power he had received wasn't a blessing or divine favor at all. In truth, it felt more like a curse. Determined to stop relying on the sword god's blessing and its dangers, he was motivated to find new equipment. However, this strange power seemed to go against his will, taking control of his body. When he lost control, it wasn't just that he felt no pain, he felt utterly free. But deep down, he knew he was being controlled like a puppet pulled by strings. The voice kept urging him, cut more, cut deeper, destroy everything. For a brief moment, he lost control of his body entirely. It was only when he heard Chloe's desperate scream that his mind snapped back into place. He saw fragments of that other world and managed to let go of the sword, breaking the effect. His body instinctively understood that if he didn't release the blade at that moment, he would lose himself forever. Ironically, the Yandere girl who once wanted to kill him was the one who brought him back to his senses. In a way, he was irritated that the power had activated because Chloe had broken the sword. But of course, he also felt grateful. He left in a hurry, but the lingering question remained, how could he avoid this power activating again for the rest of his life? This so-called blessing of the sword god was, in truth, much more of a curse. Kang began to understand that he was exchanging pieces of his life to activate the effect. In this world where he didn't belong, he was something of an alien. He didn't ask for much, just a simple, normal life. He could handle minor accidents when they happened. But now he finally realized something deeper. There was something within him, something trying to consume his mind. What he had received wasn't a blessing. It was a curse intent on devouring him in the end. This was the art of the reversed sky. 3 days pass and we're back in the classroom. A guy with purple hair tells Chloe that she should have seen something. She dodges the conversation, saying she'll check it out later. However, at this moment she's only worried because Kang Jiama hasn't shown up today. When she knocked on his door earlier, all she heard were some groans of pain. She was afraid he'd hate her for breaking the door, so she just walked away. But at that moment, she realized how much she liked watching him from a distance when he was lost in thought. "Oh girl, you're crazy yandere, get out of here." She wonders how many times she secretly watched him, having lost count by now. And she always made sure to be as discreet as possible so he wouldn't think she was an annoying girl. Then she admits she's missing the boy. We skip ahead another day, 4 days already. Man, time flies. The teacher tells everyone to quiet down. He asks if they're attending this prestigious school just for show. Since it was raining today, they would stay in for study sessions instead of training outside. However, the teacher is constantly noticing Kang Jiama's absence, but he trusts the boy and will patiently wait for him. He then tells everyone to start studying. A while later, the teacher hears someone arriving and asks who the bold soul is that dared to show up late. But then he's startled. A figure was approaching. Chloe calls out to him and asks what's going on. "Wait a second, where's our kind-hearted Kang Jiama?" The boy's turned into a bad boy. The girls are all over it, and the teacher tells them not to worry and to take their seats. Everyone's wondering if he's really the same special admission student from before. He looks so different now. Someone even comments that he looks more handsome. I told you they love the bad boys. Kang sits in his chair with a face that screams he hates the world. A while later, class ends and everyone heads to the cafeteria for lunch. Chloe goes to talk to our boy and asks him what's going on. She wants to know what happened, but he just says it's nothing serious. She mentions that he was absent for a while and she was worried. Did it have something to do with that duel? He turns to her all glowing and says he was just a bit sick, but thanks her for worrying about him. The boy's heart is stirred. She is a little flustered and says she's relieved to hear that. Our boy knows she probably doesn't believe his excuse. In truth, what he'd been through over the past 3 days was a kind of extreme withdrawal. He was mentally drained and couldn't even leave his room to eat. He was stuck in bed, begging for the convulsions to stop. This time he suffered far worse pain than before, a price for using that broken weapon. But that wasn't the only thing that happened. When he looked in the mirror, he noticed he had a skeletal appearance, and even his hair was starting to turn white. He's certain this is the price he paid for meddling with that damned god. At that moment, he notices that Chloe feels guilty. Considering she was the last person to see him before all this, it makes sense. He then decides he wants to help her stop blaming herself. So he asks if her dinner invitation is still on the table. The girl gets so flustered that she can't hear him properly and asks him to repeat it. As he's about to reply, she suddenly jumps with joy, saying of course she was very happy. The protagonist is glad she seems to have liked the idea. She then tells him she'll prepare anything he wants to eat and asks what he'd like. He says he'd like to have fish again because he really likes it, and it's been a while since he last ate it, since the last time he threw up. As he's about to explain why, suddenly, something red brushes past his neck. He looks to the side and sees a plant emitting some kind of energy and wonders what the heck it is. Then he looks in the other direction and sees it. It's that guy, Nox Audior, smirking as if he's about to cause trouble. Chloe looks scared. Kang immediately asks if she knows him. He glances at the guy standing there, and they lock eyes. Our protagonist doesn't waste time and steps up to him, demanding he speak instead of just staring. The guy keeps looking at him with glowing red eyes, and Kang wonders what that is. Meanwhile, Chloe tells Kang not to get involved with this person and orders Nox to leave. Kang Jiama notices that although she seems angry, her trembling voice betrays her fear of this man. Nox comments that the boy doesn't seem like much and asks Chloe if she's really going to break the rules for him. She responds that she has nothing to do with the Cecilia Audior clan anymore. But Nox replies that the blood on her hands will never be washed clean, and that since she was born into this family, she will always be a part of it. The protagonist quickly picks up that she's being treated as a rebel and seems to have some kind of family drama. Nox tells her to get rid of that thing and return to the clan, but Chloe shouts at him not to call Kang a thing. The last thing Kang wanted was more problems right now. He starts to wonder about this Audior clan. He recalls that in the game they were a shadowy group that appeared halfway through the story. In terms of raw power, they were weaker than any other heroic house, but they were unmatched when it came to assassination. Moreover, every member of this clan was incredibly strong, thanks to the harsh regimen they forced on their children. All of them were molded from an early age into lethal assassins. He thinks about how, given all this, Nox seems like the normal one. It's Chloe who's the oddball. being so cheerful despite everything. The guy had an expression that showed he wouldn't hesitate to kill if necessary. Kang is sure the audioers are professionals at eliminating enemies to maintain order. Not that our boy is against killing people when necessary. Oh sure, says the guy who couldn't even kill a fly back in the 3D world. Kang notices Chloe trembling beside him. What's this? The girl's even biting her lips until they bleed. Kang understands that Chloe just wanted to live a normal life. But just like him and his cursed sword blessing, for someone born into the audioers, it was impossible. She was destined to live a life of senseless killing. However, he's no hero. He doesn't aspire to be one and never will. Still, just because he can't save the world doesn't mean he can't save a single life. He then asks himself why he's doing this. He decides to protect Chloe and resolve this issue with Nox. Even if his power is a curse, he won't let it turn him into a weakling. He asks if the guy's name is Nox, recalling his futile attempts to escape his damned blessing. As people always say, there's no paradise for those who try to run. Since escaping was impossible anyway, he decided to move forward. Jian meant sword and Ma meant demon. Man with a name like Sword Demon. His family's clearly thriving emotionally. He tells Nox that now he's going to cut him down. In another room at the academy, the teacher is deep in thought. He knows something happened to their dear Jianma, but the boy's expression was completely emotionless. Just then, another girl enters the room and teases him, saying that with such a grumpy face, he's going to go bald. He snaps at her not to talk about baldness, and she apologizes. At that moment, he gets a call and looks alarmed as he asks what's going on. He demands to know what this subspace business is and which cadets are trying to get involved in the confrontation. Then he learns it's a clash between Kang Jianma and Nox Audior. A door opens, revealing that the subspace arena was being prepared. There were 15 minutes left and Kang hadn't expected it to be so easy to set up. Media had said she'd help if that's what he wanted, but he'd have to take care of himself. Since it wasn't reality, he wouldn't suffer any physical damage, though the mental strain could still take a toll. But he was confident. None of that mattered as long as he won. He can already hear a commotion outside and never imagined there'd be so much interest in this fight. It's ironic to him, considering that not long ago, his dream was to avoid drawing any attention. Chloe's crying beside him, calling his name. Our boy knows she's blaming herself, so he tells her not to think this has anything to do with her. He even thanks her for lending him this amazing equipment. They share a brief silence before she admits that Nox is really strong. Our guy says he's sure she's just as strong as him. She explains that it's not quite the same because Nox is an unparalleled genius in the family's entire history. He was already reaching the pinnacle of dark arts. Kang finds all these grandiose titles cringeworthy. But since the game was always like this, there's no point dwelling on it. Now that he's involved, there's no running away. He recalls his teacher once saying that he was destined to wield a blade for the rest of his life. What he hadn't expected was that he'd already be doing the same thing in this reincarnation. The announcement for the duel's start echoes. He stands up and tells Chloe he's heading out. She seems hesitant, so he calls her name. He reassures her, saying not to worry because the world is full of geniuses, and that's why I'll win. Oh, trying to say you're a genius too, you slay protagonist. The door slowly opens, and he covers his face. What's this subspace? It's an arena, but there's a massive crowd watching. This isn't a simple one-on-one duel. Our boy feels like a gladiator in a Roman Colosseum. He notices something in the distance and wonders why even the elites are present. Seriously, here comes our beloved Abel, and the protagonist puts on a show. Our guy wonders if these people have nothing better to do than watch him fight. Suddenly, Nox appears, already losing his temper. The boy's about to explode. At this rate, he's gonna die young. Nox demands to know if Kang can't distinguish between courage and arrogance. He asks why Kang is here with such a pitiful excuse for a blade. The dark aura begins to move toward Kang, who quickly realizes it's the guy's killing intent. Kang responds, a good fighter never blames the equipment. Nox is about to lose it, but decides to end things quickly. A crow materializes behind him, and he announces he'll start by cutting out Kang's insolent tongue. Kang notices the guy's equipment is ridiculously overpowered. Of course, the bastard is relying on the blade. Wait, what? The guy's using a Hong-Ran blade, an S-rank weapon. That's so broken. Kang is obviously impressed, but not surprised. It might be absurd that Nox came in with such gear, but Kang also came prepared. He's wielding a sashimi knife he borrowed from Chloe's kitchen. The drone approaches and announces the start of the combat. A blue light shines, and the drone wishes the blessings of the heroes upon them. The two face each other. Kang immediately activates blessings to suppress pain and calls on the blessing of the sword god. The boy's eyes turn white as if possessed by demons. The crowd begins murmuring, was that real? They're confused, saying this was supposed to be an easy fight. But the fight kicks off with a flurry of attacks. A blonde in the audience remarks that they're quicker than expected. Meanwhile, Abel can't believe the weakling from before actually knows how to fight. Kang deflects another strike, and Nox goes for another hit. One of Nox's attacks lands on the ground, sending purple slashes toward Kang. However, the attack seems to miss entirely. Nox challenges Kang to dodge this next move as he leaps into the air and activates the three-headed crow technique. The protagonist stands still for a moment, suddenly enveloped in a purple aura. Nox is confident that Kang is dead now. However, Kang transforms into a blue blur. The next second, he's on the other side of the arena, completely unharmed. The audience starts commenting that despite Nox's strong attacks, the boy is holding his own. Abel is puzzled, wondering how Kang, who just joined the academy, is standing up to someone like Nox. What's worse, it seems like Kang is dodging everything effortlessly, as if he's not even trying to fight. Nox recalls Klo warning him that Kang wasn't an ordinary guy. Even with the crow technique, nothing happened. At least Kang was only dodging, so maybe he was just someone who specialized entirely in agility. For now, Nox decides to be cautious and wait for the perfect moment. The problem is that his rage keeps building every time he sees Kang fighting with kitchen knives. Suddenly, one of Kang's knives drops to the ground and Nox demands to know what the hell Kang is planning. Kang stretches his arm forward, holding the remaining knife, which even has little floral decorations on it. He points it at Nox, who's completely baffled. Nox stares, confused about why Kang is frozen in that stance. Still, if Kang is planning to gamble everything on a single strike, Nox resolves to use all his power in the next attack. Nox begins to boast about the Hongryong blade, but in the blink of an eye, Kang vanishes, startling him. In the midst of the attack, the protagonist reflects that all he ever wanted was to live a comfortable life. He never wanted to stand out, preferring to blend into the masses as much as possible. But he's realized that since there's no escaping this, he might as well cut through everything perfectly. Wait, there goes an arm flying. Looks like someone got disconnected. The fool Nox didn't even see it coming and Kang is already behind him. The audience is stunned, their jaws dropping in disbelief. Meanwhile, Kang vows to use everything at his disposal, whether a blessing or a curse. It's time to say goodbye to the idea of a peaceful future. I thought our boy would go easy, but here comes another slash and Nox looks terrified. Oh no, now the head's gone too. I really thought our protagonist would be the calm and collected type, but out of nowhere, the boy's gone full bad boy. The arena erupts in a massive explosion, leaving everyone stunned, with Nox lying motionless on the ground. Meanwhile, Kang calmly sheathes his convenience store knife. Abel is shocked, while her friend has heart-shaped pupils. Haha, looking at whom? You guessed it, him. With that, the duel ends and the crowd erupts in cheers. Kang had anticipated this reaction. There's no turning back now. He did all of this with a knife meant for slicing fish. Though he already knew slashing a blade through human flesh was anything but pleasant, at least Nox was intact beside him, a testament to how impressive the subspace truly was. Even so, Kang's psyche was in shambles. Kang Jiama acknowledges that Nox was indeed as strong as Klo said, with a good sense of battle. However, his killing intent made his moves too predictable. The drone flying overhead announces winner Kang Jiama in 26 seconds. Everyone is astonished that a first-year student defeated a second year. Kang receives a flood of attention, but he knows there's no escaping it now. Since this is the path he's been forced onto, he resolves to give it his all. Throughout the academy, the only topic is the boy who took down an audior. Everyone is stunned at how someone could be strong enough to be a guy like that. Meanwhile, Abel can't stop thinking. Wherever she goes, she hears his name, inevitable given what happened yesterday. When Nox's arm fell to the ground, she couldn't believe it. At that moment, she was paralyzed, trying to comprehend how he wielded such precise swordsmanship with kitchen knives. She had always taken pride in her knowledge, being the granddaughter of the sword master, but she realized how naive she had been. A memory flashes in her mind. The time she smugly said she was curious about the person who managed to beat her. She'd been eager to crush him the next time. She also remembers teasingly making a cute face, saying she was sharing everything because he seemed weak. Now she starts connecting the dots and wonders if he's this year's top student. The girl is practically ready to explode, her face reddening as she mutters that it must be this damned guy who's stronger than her. Now she wants to know what was going through his head at that moment. Abel wakes up startled and Rachel, her blonde friend, asks what's going on. Abel apologizes, saying it's nothing. Man, I've got a trauma with blonde girls named Rachel. Those who know. Rachel presses, asking if she's sure, but Abel insists she's just feeling a bit tired. Still, Rachel notices something and teases her, asking what she's hiding. Is she hungry? Abel says no. Did she forget her gear at home? Abel denies it again. Maybe you need the bathroom. Abel snaps, telling her to shut up. Then Rachel asks it's about a boy. Abel immediately turns as red as a tomato, and Rachel catches on. She starts laughing, saying she never imagined the legendary Abel would get involved in romance. Flustered, Abel stammers that Rachel is misunderstanding. It's nothing romantic. But Rachel is already curious about who the lucky guy is. Who managed to steal the heart of the legendary Abel? Rachel starts listing options, asking if it's Leon since he's handsome. But Abel's expression makes it clear it's not him. Rachel finds it odd that Abel closed up at the mention of Leon and starts thinking about who else it could be. Then she asks, could it be that special student from yesterday? The moment she says Kang's name, Abel freezes. Rachel, ever the psycho, is delighted, claiming she's a genius at this. She grabs Abel's hand and declares it's time to go. Obviously, Abel wants to know where. To the Tiger's classroom, Rachel announces. 1 second later, she bursts through the door, announcing her entrance. The guys inside are all stunned, drooling at the girl's beauty. They walk into the room, but Rachel wastes no time. She climbs onto a table and yells, "Where's that black-haired guy?" She scans the room until someone points out that regardless of her status, she shouldn't be standing on tables. But the crazy girl dismisses him, saying she's pretty enough to do it, and the fool agrees. Abel stands awkwardly to the side, thoroughly embarrassed. Suddenly, Rachel's face lights up with a twisted grin. "I found him," she exclaims. The problem? She noticed Chloe looking at Kang with hearts in her eyes. Rachel gets even more excited, claiming this makes things even better. "What?" She starts unbuttoning her shirt and loosening her tie, muttering about how much fun this will be. "Girl, you're supposed to be helping your friend, not competing with her." Poor Chloe was sitting quietly until she suddenly felt a chill in her stomach. Rachel walks over and starts sniffing our boy. The other two girls are utterly confused by this. Rachel just says, "Oops," and throws herself onto the table. Meanwhile, Kang starts waking up, drooling a bit. The competitor warrior smirks and asks if he's awake. He doesn't respond, so she asks, "Are you Kang Jiama?" Our boy Kang Jiama is completely confused, trying to figure out why Rachel is even here. She's pointing her finger at him, saying, "Up close you're even better looking." But for some reason, his gut is screaming that this is dangerous. Suddenly, Chloe grabs Rachel's arm and demands to know who she is. Chloe does not look happy. Now Rachel's confused about this girl staring her down. Kang finally understands why his instincts were screaming at him. Rachel's demeanor shifts dramatically as she pulls out a dagger. A fight is about to break out in the middle of the classroom, something Kang has never seen happen in the game. Abel steps in and asks Rachel what she thinks she's doing. Rachel casually replies that she was just stopping by to say hi. Abel sighs, walks over, and gently places her hand on Rachel's head, saying, "Don't interrupt when the adults are talking, and drop that sharp object while you're at it." But Chloe isn't backing down. She lunges at Rachel, yelling, "Die already." Rachel glances sideways, and there's a sudden splash of red. Wait, no, it's strawberry juice or something. Turns out Rachel effortlessly blocked Chloe's attack. She even taunts her, saying she's weak, short, slow, and out of control. Wow, girl would escalate. Rachel grips Chloe's arm tightly until Abel shouts for her to stop. She does stop by flinging Chloe across the room. Poor Chloe goes flying, but somehow lands gracefully on her feet like an angel. Meanwhile, the guys in the room are loving this drama. Here's the truth. Rachel is from the Sword Saints clan, where brute strength is the ultimate mantra. She turns to Kang and asks, "Is that girl your girlfriend?" Kang replies, "No." He notices Chloe doesn't look happy to hear that, but what can he do? It's the truth. "We're just friends," he adds, all while trying to piece together what kind of chaotic situation he's been dragged into. Only now does Kang realize Abel is also here. She awkwardly asks why the two of them came looking for him. Rachel smirks and says, "Abel's interested in you, and I wanted to see for myself." Abel immediately flushes, stammering, "When did I say that?" She starts rambling, trying to explain herself, but ultimately just leaves everyone more confused. Embarrassed, she turns away, muttering that this is all a misunderstanding, and that she never asked to come here. Stigma Kang, unfazed, says, "If that's the case, you can leave now." Rachel's hard eyes dim slightly at his bluntness. It seems she's into guys who reject her because she immediately replies, "You're interesting, just the way I like them." Kang retorts, "Good to know you like interesting guys, but I'm not one of them." But Rachel isn't deterred. "Don't be like that," she says. "How about coming to my dorm after class today? We can watch Netflix." She spells it out slowly to make her intentions crystal clear. Chloe snaps, yelling, "Take your hands off Kang." Rachel bursts out laughing, saying it's hilarious how Chloe thinks he belongs to her. But Abel's had enough. She calls out to Rachel, trying to regain some control. Rachel stands up, brushing herself off. "Well, it was nice meeting you, Kang Jiama," she says, full of hearts in her eyes. "I'll see you later." She waves goodbye, leaving Kang wishing everyone would just disappear. The moment they turn around, he goes back to sleep. But Abel pauses for a second, glances back at him, and oh no, girl's got that look. She's totally crushing. She turns away quickly and follows Rachel out. Meanwhile, in the corridor, Rachel is deep in thought, reflecting on Kang's cold gaze. She realizes there's a difference between someone being cold and the sheer intensity in his eyes. When he looked at her, she felt like her throat was about to be slit. That encounter had far exceeded her expectations, even giving her chills. She'd gone there just to toy with him, never imagining she'd find someone like this. For her clan, finding exceptional warriors for breeding purposes is a priority. She starts considering Kang as a valuable resource. That Netflix invite might have led somewhere, huh? She teases Abel, saying it's no wonder Kang caught the attention of the invincible princess. Then she abruptly apologizes. Abel brushes it off, saying Rachel should apologize to the students whose class she disrupted. But Rachel clarifies, "I'm not apologizing for that. I'm apologizing for Kang Jiama. Unfortunately, I'm the one who's going to enjoy him." Elsewhere in the hospital, Nox has just woken up, muttering, "I'll kill that bastard." Until that fight, he was known as the genius of the auditors. His body had never tasted defeat. He contemplates sneaking into Kang's dorm at night to kill him, but recalls the sheer presence Kang exuded during their duel. Shoving a nurse aside, Nox storms out, vowing to mobilize every auditor to cut Kang's head off. In the end, he also plans to reclaim Chloe, whose potential might even surpass his own. It was the perfect moment for Nox to strike. After all, his nocturnal techniques were most effective at this hour. He was certain he'd show Kang Jiama who was boss. But as he opened the door, he was startled. There he was, Kang, casually eating an apple. Nox thought there'd be something peculiar waiting for him, but no. Kang just looked at him and asked, "What's the senior doing here?" Nox froze, unsure of how to respond. In the end, nothing happened, and we cut to the next day, where Chloe is nervously biting her nails. Our boy notices her frustration, even though she was the one who had drawn her blade. Chloe, clearly irritated, starts muttering about whether Kang likes women with huge airbags. If that's the case, she'll have to kill that woman. Kang interrupts her train of thought, calling her name. Snapped back to reality, Chloe asks if he needs something, while Kang silently hopes she'll put the blade down. He then asks, "How's Nox doing?" She hesitates for a second before responding, "He's in the medical wing." Kang finds this odd. "That's strange. I don't remember injuring him." Chloe shrugs, saying she hasn't visited him, but she heard he was admitted there despite not having any visible injuries. "But don't worry, I'm sure he's fine," she adds. Kang knows Nox isn't the type to be mentally broken by such a trivial defeat. He can't help but hope the guy isn't planning anything. With that thought, he decides to ask Chloe, "Where's Nox's room?" Now we're back in the present, where Nox is trembling as Kang calmly eats an apple in his room. Nox, his voice shaky, asks, "See, can I have an apple?" Kang looks at him with a raised brow and points out, "You're asking while I'm already eating it." Unbothered, Kang glances around and comments, "The Audior family must be loaded to give you a room like this all to yourself." Nox, still confused, asks, "How did you even get in here?" Kang doesn't answer. Instead, he reaches for his knife, making Nox tense up. Is Kang here to finish the job? But no. Kang picks up the knife and resumes slicing his apple with expert precision. Nox can't help but marvel at Kang's skill, wondering why he's so good at something as mundane as cutting fruit. Kang sets the neatly sliced apple on Nox's desk and says, "When your digestion's not great, fruit can help." Nox realizes he's being humiliated. His face twists in anger as he grabs for his blade, ready to end this insult. But Kang freezes him with his next words. "If you ever even think about revenge, I'll personally go after the entire Audior family." Nox is stunned. Kang walks to the door, shuts it behind him, and leaves without another word. Outside the room, Kang lets out a sigh, a smirk creeping onto his face. "Just a candle I can snuff out at any moment," he mutters, referring to Nox. He knows he probably crushed whatever willpower Nox had left. Of course, it was all a bluff. There's no way he could wipe out the entire Audior family in 30 seconds. Maybe he could take out a few in that time, but he really wants to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. As he walks away, Kang reflects that he feels like he's in the eye of a storm. This wasn't the plan, but he's getting used to it. It seems this world is driving him a little insane too. At least now, if Nox backs off, he won't have to deal with him anymore. But Kang's real problem lies with someone else entirely. The crazy girl who was supposed to be the first to approach the protagonist in the original story. He needs to think carefully about what to do next. With the upcoming competition looming, Kang knows he has to take it seriously. The reward, the legendary Murasem, is something he desperately needs. His current issue, it's going to take him longer than 30 seconds to win this. The test involves defeating demonic monsters in teams of 5. The focus is less on individual prowess and more on teamwork. But if he can find good allies, he should be able to handle it. Fortunately, Kang already knows the monsters will be D-rank mermen. Unfortunately, he remembers how awful they were in the game. Imagine facing them in real life. At least they aren't sirens. Though pleasing to the eyes, those creatures are far worse. He recalls that sirens are considered demonic humans, while the mermen are just demonic monsters. By comparison, mermen aren't as terrifying. Sitting on a bench, Kang reflects that it's been a month since he arrived here. The peaceful evening reminds him of the tranquility he had hoped for when entering this world. 700 years have passed since humans and demons signed the peace treaty. Even so, small skirmishes and major conflicts have occurred here and there. For example, the Vasman dispute 50 years ago, when the commander of the 6th Legion claimed to have resurrected the 1st Legion commander, breaking the treaty. Flashes of the past play in Kang's mind. Vasman landing a punch on a white-haired soldier while media screened for Sieg. A younger version of the legendary hero emerges, cutting through demons with his blade. Humanity triumphed, birthing 7 heroes, though not without sacrifices. The outcome led both factions to avoid further escalation. But Kang recalls a moment when someone mocked ridiculous to call him humanity's strongest when all he did was kill the 6th commander. Back on the bench, Kang wonders, is this the peace they fought for? The more he ponders, the more he remembers the 1st commander, Baylor Jokum, who sealed the 1st Legion leader. And he knows, for years from now, the demons will launch their 2nd attack, including the first appearance of the Demon King. Still, thinking about it now won't change anything. Kang knows he has to focus on the upcoming tests. It's going to be a bit annoying, but first he needs to find some allies. The problem? His phone contacts are empty. He has no friends. That's when it hits him. He's become quite famous at the academy, so maybe he can use that to his advantage. If things have reached this point, he's going to recruit the right people to ensure the highest score on this test. He still dreams of a comfortable life, even if achieving it quietly isn't possible. A week passes and Kang is trembling with anxiety. Not a single person has invited him to join their group. He thinks back to how he sliced through Nox and wonders why no one's reaching out. Turns out, everyone is terrified of him. Looking around, he notices something odd. Chloe, like him, is also considered an outsider and hasn't been invited to any group. Approaching her, he asks if she hasn't found a team. She admits she hasn't. Kang finds it strange considering she used to have a few friends. Seeing this as an opportunity, he suggests she join him. We just need 3 more people, he says. Chloe agrees without hesitation. She's an excellent fighter, so Kang is confident she'll be a great addition. Considering he can only fight for 30 seconds at a time, Chloe's worth 1,000 of him. Chloe beams with happiness, but their moment is interrupted by someone shouting Kang's name. It's Rachel declaring she's back to play with him. Kang sighs, already dreading her return. When he asks why she's here, she responds, "I just told you, didn't I?" Rachel is fidgeting, muttering something about the big guy coming. Kang turns to her and flatly tells her to get to the point. He's not in the mood for games. Rachel, on the verge of tears, asks why he's so cold. Kang groans, asking her to stop calling him my Jiam. Rachel pretends not to hear, claiming she's a little deaf today. Then, as if by accident, she collapses onto a desk, her airbags landing first, and says she's a little clumsy. Ignoring her antics, Rachel turns to Kang and asks if he has a group for the test. Without thinking, Kang says no. Rachel's eyes light up as she invites him to join her team. She even grabs his chin, teasingly saying, "Gotcha now." Kang, clearly unimpressed, pushes her hand away and asks why she wants him, when she probably has a dozen other suitors. Rachel smirks and replies, "Because I know it'll be much more fun with you." Kang explains he already has a group with Chloe. Rachel says that's great, now they only need 2 more people. Kang is baffled. Doesn't she realize she's risking her own score by teaming up with him? He looks at Chloe, who seems fine with the idea. Turning back to Rachel, he reluctantly says, "All right, we're in your hands." Rachel claps her hands together, declaring no turning back now. Curious, Kang asks who else she plans to recruit. Rachel grins and asks if he knows someone named Leon. Kang freezes. The protagonist? Trembling, he wonders what he did in a past life to deserve this. All he ever did was slice fish for 30 years, and now he's being dragged into the lives of Leon, Abel, and Rachel, the very people he wanted to avoid. The girls, while beautiful, aren't the real issue. It's Leon. As the protagonist, his presence could completely derail the future Kang thought he understood. Kang considers backing out, but Rachel doesn't give him a chance. The second he agrees, she submits their team registration, locking him in. For the first time in his life, Kang genuinely wants to cut someone. Chloe notices his distress and asks if something's wrong. She mentions that ever since that hardworking girl entered the room, Kang hasn't seen himself. Kang shrugs it off, saying he's just surprised to be doing the test with this group. Chloe reassures him, saying she's confident no one in their group is stronger than him. Kang starts to reconsider the situation. He was the one who invited Chloe, so he can't abandon her now. Besides, there really isn't anyone better in the school than the people in his group. Maybe he just needs to be a little more optimistic. He asks Chloe when the team meeting is. She replies that the giant blonde said it's at 6 in the cafeteria. The scene shifts to a Starbucks, with 2 S's, because why not? Chloe slams her cup on the table, exclaiming how delicious her drink is. Kang, on the other hand, is horrified that her drink cost $35. Robbery, he mutters under his breath. He grudgingly buys a $7 espresso, the cheapest thing on the menu, and hates every sip. Suddenly, his phone vibrates. It's Rachel, pretending she's already at the Starbucks and asking when he'll arrive. Kang tells her to just come in already. Moments later, Rachel appears, apologizing for being late, with Leon following behind her. Rachel surveys the room, spots Kang and Chloe, and asks if they waited long. Leon, however, is staring directly at Kang. Kang looks back and immediately notices Leon's orange hair. His first thought, this guy looks like a delinquent. I thought it would be Abel, but apparently it's this guy. Leon steps forward, offering a polite "nice to meet you," introduces himself. He compliments Kang on his fight against Nox, saying it was impressive. Kang, observing him, notes Leon's voice strikes the perfect balance between intelligence and class, undoubtedly the protagonist of this world. They all sit down and introductions begin. Leon starts introducing himself as a student of the star class and the leader of their group. Kang feels a pang of jealousy. Not only is Leon skilled, but he's also incredibly handsome, while Kang feels worn down by everything. Rachel, already well known to the group, skips her introduction, passing the spotlight to the next person. A guy introduces himself as Speed Weapon, also a star class student. Kang is unimpressed, thinking the name is so unusual it needs a better explanation. Speed Weapon even has a tattoo of a superhero on his neck, clearly obsessed. Next is Chloe, who introduces herself as Chloe Audior from the Wolf class, adding that she's here thanks to Guyan. Rachel can't resist giggling, repeating Kang's name, Jiama, in a sing-song voice. Chloe scowls but quickly composes herself, saying it's a pleasure to meet everyone. Now, all eyes turn to Kang. He keeps his introduction brief. Kang Jiama from the same class as Chloe. The atmosphere in the room feels a bit awkward. Someone finally breaks the silence by opening a laptop and declaring it's time to start the meeting. A hologram of an island appears on the screen. The leader explains that earlier today during the break, the professors gave each team leader some files. The hologram is a map of where the test will take place. They'll be teleported to the island using subspace technology, but the island itself is real. That means injuries caused by the beasts there will be real too. Zooming in on the map, Leon points out that their team has been assigned to the northern region. There are 3 other groups on the island, and their goal is to kill as many mermen as possible since the number of creatures is limited. Leon finishes his explanation, asking if anyone has questions. Speed Weapon raises his hand, asking if the island has sirens and whether they pose any risk. Leon reassures him, saying the professors have already conducted thorough research. Chloe then asks if teams are allowed to attack each other during the test. Liam explains that since the goal is to kill the beasts, groups that engage in sabotage will likely be disqualified. Kang quietly notes that this is disappointing news for Chloe, given her background as an assassin. With that, the meeting concludes and everyone starts leaving. Leon lingers to gather his things, leaving only him and Kang in the room. Kang stands up intending to slip away unnoticed, but Leon calls out to him. Kang turns, confused. Leon asks where he's from. The question is straightforward enough, but Kang senses a deeper meaning behind it. Leon's gaze is piercing and Kang struggles to think of an answer. While the question itself isn't unusual, the timing and tone make it feel off. Before Kang can respond, Leon apologizes, saying it was rude to ask so suddenly. He explains that he just had this strange feeling that they were similar. Kang is even more puzzled. While Korean is the official language of this world, other cultures exist, and it's obvious to anyone that Kang is Korean. Why would Leon ask something like that? Leon brushes it off, telling Kang to pretend he didn't say anything and leaves the room. But suddenly, Kang places a hand on Leon's shoulder, stopping him. "Wait," Kang says, surprising even himself. Without thinking, he asks, "Where are you from?" Leon raises an eyebrow but calmly replies, "Germany." He then gently removes Kang's hand and walks away, leaving Kang standing there bewildered. Kang starts questioning himself. Is he overthinking this? Why did he feel the need to ask that? Could Leon be from another world just like him? The idea seems absurd, but Kang can't shake the thought. If you think about it, taking over the protagonist's body would make more sense than taking over a random side character's. He glances at his blade, remembering how his instincts and reasoning sharpen when he activates its power. He decides to test it out, focusing on the existence of Leon in this world. Almost immediately, he feels the strange sensation of a familiar voice whispering to him. The problem? It comes with an intense headache, one even his pain suppression blessing can't fully mitigate. After a moment, he confirms what he already suspected. The Leon he met is exactly like the one from the game. Even the original author couldn't replicate him so perfectly, but still Leon's comment about them being similar lingers in Kang's mind. Determined to find answers, Kang looks up Leon online but finds nothing useful. He curses himself for never caring about the male characters' backstories when playing the game. He tries to reassure himself that nothing will go wrong just because he crossed paths with Leon once. If it happens again, he decides he'll consult media. One thing Kang does notice, though, is how much calmer he's become in situations he would normally avoid. Perhaps this is the influence of one of his blessings. Opening his skills menu, he sees that his assimilation rate has increased from 2.5 to 6.8. The mental fortitude and weaponry were still the same. Of course, his physical power had increased slightly due to training, and Kang was certain his weaponry skill would rise once he got his hands on the mercenary. But what was this assimilation that kept increasing the most? The only different things he had done recently were his fights with Nox and Chloe, so maybe it was related to that. Unfortunately, he had no way of figuring it out on his own and no one he could ask. Suddenly, a new notification window appeared, informing him that he had achieved a certain number of blessings and adjustments would be made. Kang was puzzled but noticed that his pain suppression blessing had been upgraded from 30 seconds to 40. Finally, he was reaping the benefits of his hard work. The sensation of leveling up felt incredible. Time flew by as he trained physically, attended group meetings, practiced with Chloe, and dodged Rachel, who seemed glued to his side. With just one day left, Kang poured everything into his training, slicing even the droplets of sweat as they fell. His precision was impeccable. Proud of himself, he was ready for the exam. Finally, the day arrived. In front of him stood an enormous subspace gate, radiating a completely different vibe from the ones used in training. Someone called his name, and he turned to see the group fully armed and ready. Among them, Rachel's oversized weapon was hard to miss, though the biggest weapon wasn't exactly her halberd. Rachel, as dangerous as ever, teased him about being late. Leon called out to him, saying, "Hurry up," while Speed Weapon said nothing as usual. Chloe greeted Kang cheerfully as he joined them at the back of the group. Walking along, Kang was impressed by everyone's equipment. Rachel wielded an S-rank halberd called Vermilion Phoenix, and while Leon didn't seem to have his iconic Balmung yet, Speed Weapon was wearing a strange tube-like device on his chest. When Kang stared at it, Speed Weapon turned and snapped. "What are you looking at?" Chloe explained it was a healing support item. Most impressively, it was an S-rank artifact, which must have cost millions. Kang thought it was amazing, but Speed Weapon warned him to stay away. Suddenly, a voice announced the start of the exam. The professor addressed the group, saying, "Looking at your faces, you seem ready, but remember, you're still cadets, not heroes. Be cautious and don't take unnecessary risks for a few extra credits. Anyone who gets injured can withdraw at any time." Leon stepped forward, rallying the group. "The time has come. Let's give it our best." The day Kang had been preparing for was finally here. Strangely though, clothes seemed a bit off. When Kang asked what was wrong, she admitted she was uneasy about the possibility of sirens appearing on the island. Kang reassured her, reminding her that the instructors had already cleared the area. He later learned that Chloe's homeland had been one of the most devastated by siren attacks in the past. The professor signaled for them to step through the gate. Kang ruffled Chloe's hair and said, "Let's go." Blushing, she stammered, "With Jiama around, there's nothing to worry about." With that, they entered the portal. Suddenly, Chloe heard Kang's voice shouting her name. She snapped out of a daze as Kang asked if she was finally listening. Confused, she wondered if she had lost focus. The group was discussing whether to call an instructor, mentioning their lack of connection in the subspace. Someone was already sprawled on the ground, and the real nightmare had begun. A siren appeared before them. Before that moment, the group had arrived on the island of Scapuli. The trip left everyone vomiting on the ground except Kang, who stood unfazed. Leon, impressed, asked how he was fine. Kang shrugged, saying he never got seasick. Before they could regroup, the first merman appeared. Kang was surprised. It was much smaller than he had imagined. Feeling like a fool for taking it so seriously, he thought the task might be easier than expected. Liam clarified that these were the smallest mermen. The closer they got to the central area, the larger they would become. Their first priority was to locate Chloe, who had been separated from the group for some reason. As they moved through the forest, Leon warned them to stay alert, sensing her nearby. Suddenly, a red blur descended from the trees. Chloe landed in front of them. Leon Benuz asked why she was swinging from branch to branch like a monkey. Chloe admitted she had been trying to stay unnoticed. The leader asked about the situation, and Chloe reported that a cave lay 500 meters ahead. Soon, the group stood before the cave, its entrance dark and foreboding. Inside, dozens of glowing eyes reflected the firelight. Mermen filled the cavern. Rachel estimated at least 50 or 60 of them. The group discussed their options. If they wiped out this horde, they would almost certainly secure first place. However, the risks and potential injuries were significant. In the end, the decision rested with Leon. A few moments before, the group had agreed that Chloe would be the one to scout the island. Speed Weapon had volunteered, but Leon pointed out that it wouldn't make sense for him to do so. Leon had also assigned Kang to the rear, where he would handle any threats that approached from behind. Far from feeling humiliated, Kang thanked Leon for the easy job. Leon, meanwhile, declared that he would take the central position and only advance if necessary. When Rachel asked where he was going, Leon revealed his plan to her. Back on the island, Kang noticed from Leon's expression that he had made up his mind. Leon called Rachel, who was tasked with initiating the plan. She readied her halberd, charging it with energy before launching it Spartan style at the merman's fire pit. The rest of the group stared dumbfounded, thinking wouldn't it have been better to just kill the fish? But before the merman could react, Chloe swooped in, grabbed the halberd, and used it to slice through two of the creatures. Chloe recalled Leon's instructions, cut down as many as you can. Her reply had been a confident, of course. Speed Weapon then pulled out his flute, playing a melody that activated a blessing, leaving the merman panicked and trying to flee. Chloe, powered by the blessing, began cutting down the creatures one by one. 11, 18, 22, 24. Chloe counted, effortlessly taking down dozens. She thanked Speed Weapon for the support, noting how much easier it made things. As Chloe continued her assault, she switched to her own weapon, activating her cat blessing, which allowed her to slice through several mermen at once. One attack took down 8. When 2 more leaped to her from above, she dispatched them with ease. Meanwhile, Rachel had already killed 45, but both women soon noticed something odd. They were heading toward each other. Or rather, Chloe was charging toward Rachel. Rachel, realizing this, also moved toward Chloe. Just as the two seemed about to clash, a massive merman landed on their backs, its jaws poised to attack. Both women ignored it, continuing their charge, and in a split second, the creature was torn apart. Rachel commented, "You gotten faster." Chloe retorted, "That one was mine." With that, they split up, each heading in opposite directions. Kang, relieved that they weren't killing each other, watched as Leon took down a merman with a precise strike. Leon turned to Kang and said, "You seem worried about them." Kang replied, "I was, but it seems unnecessary. After all, the 60 mermen in the cave had already been dealt with." Leon reminded Kang to have faith in his allies, then announced it was time to move on. Kang couldn't help but be impressed. Leon's plan had worked perfectly. Of course, the plan was simply sending 2 maniacs to slaughter everything, but Kang had to admit it was effective leadership. As Kang mulled over this, a blue flash appeared behind him. Before he could react, the light passed through Leon's chest. Time seemed to freeze as everyone gasped in horror. Kang turned slowly, his breath catching as he saw the source, a demonic siren. Rachel screamed, demanding to know why it was there. Speed Weapon questioned how this was possible, given that the cave had already been cleared. Kang stood frozen. This was supposed to be a straightforward mission, but now everything had spiraled out of control. Should they fight or flee? With Leon injured, escaping seemed impossible. Rachel turned to Speed Weapon, instructing him to contact the instructors. However, he reported that the communication system had been cut off. This news sent a chill down Kang's spine. Without external help, panic was sure to spread. Taking a deep breath, Kang stepped forward, declaring, "It seems I'm the only one thinking clearly right now." He instructed Speed Weapon to start healing Leon immediately. Turning to Chloe, he told her to escape and warn the cadets and instructors to evacuate. Chloe hesitated, but Kang pointed out that fleeing with Leon in his current state would be nearly impossible. It was crucial to alert everyone before more mermen arrived. After a brief hesitation, Chloe agreed and ran off to carry out his orders. Rachel, now furious, asked Kang what he planned to do. Kang simply told her in Speed Weapon to handle the smaller threats. Closing his eyes, he muttered, "Ever since I started cooking, I've never liked dealing with small fish. You can't show real skill with easy work." Then he tells the two of them, "This is my specialty." Obviously, as like in this video that helps Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers, activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.